Basically, what we got going on for the first part is getting a subcommittee chair, but before we do that, we're gonna have invocation or thought, and then the pledge of allegiance by someone by invitation. So any volunteers for a thought or an invocation? If not, it's gonna be on me, and that's fine. Nothing?
I will.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have a thought. Father in heaven, we're grateful this afternoon to be involved in the operations of North Ogden City. We're thankful that we're able to meet and have a free country where we can meet to discuss the affairs of our community. We realize the importance of the financial aspects of that and ask that that might help us today in our discussion to not only be cognizant of the needs of the city, but also the concerns of our citizens. We know this is a tight, delicate balance that we need to maintain and help us as we, in our discussion, make decisions that will be for the benefit of this city, as well as protecting those citizen interests. We're grateful to live in a community where there is such interest and that people are involved, and ask that might help us in our discussion today, guide us and help us to be friendly with one another and be considerate of all the discussions that go on. And we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
It's barely 3 o'clock now. I'm not late.
No. Pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, thank you. And Brenda is here on time. There's
Yeah.
a seat right here, or you can move the seat back there.
We said bring it down.
Okay.
I'm gonna do what I'm told.
Oh.
We're gonna tag team.
Oh, boy. Always good.
Just kidding.
All right. So we'll lead off with the consent agenda part of it, which is discussion and action to choose a subcommittee chair. Because technically I'm not a citizen, I'm one of those pesky council guys. So, go ahead.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, please.
I suggest we appoint Brian Bartholomew. He was here last year, so he understands. I don't think it should be someone that's done it before, and I think it should be someone that's got a little bit of knowledge of exactly what we're doing here. I talked to him.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, he's more than willing to do it.
Okay.
And I spoke to a few other people who thought that would be a good idea. So I'm just throwing that name out.
Well, you have a nomination on the floor. Anybody else want to say yes or no? And
I'll second.
there you go. Okay,
Let's vote.
go ahead. All in favor of Brian Bartholomew being the Citizen Budget Committee Chair? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There you go. Okay. Any nays? Okay. So we'll have Brian, of course, he's not here. That means I get to do it. That's all
I
right.
apologize for that.
Yeah, I know. He apologizes.
Don't we all?
I give him crap because we all will. Anyway. So, okay, so to the active agenda. Is there any, we can start off kind of, is there any questions from last week? Obviously, you got peppered with stuff and, for the poor people that were online, when I kicked out the plug, it was kind of like, well, all right, I guess we don't care, or trying to figure out how to talk. So apologize for that, but if there's anything, obviously in person is a lot better. I think people understand that, but because technology is great, but at the same time, it's more flowing to be in person. But is there any questions that we can answer? John can answer, or Mr. Peter down there can answer. Overall, specific to a certain thing, we'll just kind of throw it out there.
Having not been here before, I just wondered the process. Do we discuss the budget by department? Do we have presentations for them? I mean, what's the process? Do you all handle everything, or do we have the department directors come in and give presentations?
Well, and Brian and I guess we did talk a little bit about that. To have, because right now the yellow sheets is what I would call the weeds. And I don't have a problem doing that. We've been doing it for at least several years. I know which one year we tried to be more macro instead of micro. It still got down in the weeds. But I think that's kind of up to you guys and ladies. Sorry. You ladies too. I just, you
Yeah,
if-
I just this yellow sheets of each department's thoughts and what their needs are. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's in a printed form and.
We're not gonna change that process.
Which one?
We're gonna stay with the yellow sheet process.
Oh, no, right.
Oh,
But what for here is it easier, better, more efficient to have the department heads come in and say, hey, this is what we want to do this year, here's where our concerns are, versus going, yeah, we're gonna need more Post-it notes this year, and where we didn't use much salt, so we're gonna have to blah, do we want to get in the weeds like that, or would it be much better, time well spent going bigger picture? What are all the benefits that the employees get? Is it, more efficient because we tweaked something last year on the 401k thing, and I don't think that was a budget committee thing, but it's just stuff like that, is there benefit to doing that? I guess is the question that Brian had, and that's what you're asking. So thoughts, questions?
As an advisory committee, we should let the department heads work with the small details. And we kind of provide a better overall general overview and maybe general directions.
And that's great. Did you have something else?
Yeah, I just think in the past, we have like just nickeled and dimed and it kind of was a bit ridiculous at times.
In the meeting,
Yes.
because I
And-
agree.
Well, and also when we had department heads here and they presented, I mean, there were times I was embarrassed at some of the stuff committee members would say to them. And it was like, seriously? You
Yeah.
want him to justify how much paper I mean, it was just, I think we need to look big picture much more than we have in the past.
Yeah.
Because what huge thing did we ever gain from doing all that?
Well, to be honest, it helped me in the first couple of years, because I was like, holy crap, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that they have to deal with on a year-to-year basis. But does it change much year to year? That was the kicker, the cost of postage, I think, was the only thing that really started accelerating, but everything else didn't go up that much. So, and then nothing that says that you can't go and still go into it, on your own time.
Mhm.
So I think that's the thing, is that if the committee in the meeting wants to say higher level, how do we organize that? Do we have John or staff come in and talk about stuff? Or do we want to talk about stuff based on what was done in the past? How does that look like versus just going line by line? What do you want something, staff has got to do stuff anyways when it comes to briefing us, but is there something that they can do earlier? I don't know. How earlier, I guess, John, that's a question to you, is how earlier would be beneficial or not invasive to have department heads just come in and say, hey,
If you're talking high level stuff, the earlier the better, right? Because
Yeah.
then they can pivot based on what the recommendation of the council is and what the council says yes to. So that's why part of the reason we started earlier as opposed to in March is it allows you to kind of thresh out those high level things a little more than trying to cram 3 of them into a meeting.
is there any recommendations of how you want to handle in this meeting? I mean, Ryan basically said, we should just do an hour and blah, blah, blah.
I know for me, it's been helpful when we don't get too deep into the weeds, like Sandy was saying, that I don't think that's this committee's role, really, to nickel and dime and worry about, do we use colored ink or black and white on agenda items printed for Tuesday nights, right? We don't need to worry about that kind of stuff. I think a great place to start is that Public Works comes in and says, okay, our budget last year was $1 million.
This year, we're asking for 1.3. And we talk about that 300,000 additional. Why is the budget going up? What's the justification for those things? Is it a new truck? Is it a new whatever it is? Because the city, to my knowledge, we're not at a zero-based budgeting methodology where we start from scratch every year and build up. We're just not there. So, I mean, I think we all trust our department heads well enough to say, we think you're being honest with the budget. And if there isn't any shenanigans going on, and we can start there with the 300,000 and whatever the increase is. Because there's always an increase, right? Every year there's a request for an increase. And for me, that seems to simplify this meeting pretty easily. It seems to be, Brian called me last night when we were talking about it a little bit, and seems to be the direction that he was thinking would make these meetings more efficient.
But Phil, I would say that there is the possibility of a decrease based upon the equipment there.
Exactly.
Because we've caught up, I think, on a lot of, not entirely, but we've caught up on some of the major equipment needs.
Sure.
So I like the variance idea of saying, you know, here was the budget last year.
And this is what
What's
we're asking
changing
this
up
year.
or down,
Right.
and analyze the variances. Because I think, you know, you've got some citizens who have been here a couple of years. They've gone through every line item, and my recollection didn't find anything material, so that seems to have been covered, I guess, but other people could look at it and say, well, this is important to me, where it may not have been,
But they still can do that on their own time.
yeah,
So I think that's the key thing.
they'd like to.
But what, I think, how does this meeting look in the future? And I think that's kind of what Brian was saying and what you guys are saying. Ms. Brenda.
I really like the idea of department heads coming in. I don't know if this is what you're asking for, but I liked it when a department head come in for a meeting. They discussed their department. We were able to ask questions. I don't know how else you go through the budget without, whether it's big things or little expenses, without talking to the department head people that are planning that budget. I agree, maybe we don't get into the nitpicky stuff, although I do think that pennies over time can add up if it's being frivolously used. But if you're asking for what I see these meetings, I see them actually being quite similar, where you have a department head come in, explain their budget, increase, decrease, and then if we have questions, we can ask them.
Yeah, and part of that, at least in my mind, is, you know, what the current year variance would be, but also there's something on the horizon that's bugging them. I think that's also something that we should at least address, or at least have them bring up so that, you know, we're eyes wide open type thing where.
Maybe some of that forward planning, like on the roads, how in future,
Or like,
we're going to be saving money for that.
like we need to figure out how to pay for meters, new meters, water meters, you know, stuff like that.
Chris, it would seem, just having been through this for a couple of years, it seems the major items are 2 or 3. One, I think this committee ought to see what the 5-year capital projects thing is, because there's $300,000 a year budgeted to fund those type of things. That's a major, you know, that's an increase of basically what, 10 or 12% if you didn't have it. So it would seem like to me at some point in time, this committee ought to see that 5-year capital plan, because it does include things like you talked about, funding the meters. There's actually one I think that goes out a little bit farther, isn't there, John, that talks about like major things like water tanks and.
Yeah, we could go through the impact fee facility plans that talk about the 10-year window.
There's $300,000 in the budget for that every year.
You try to anyways.
To fund those things, and you know, if you look at those things and have the department heads up there, point Brenda made, have them discuss that so this committee understands it, I think that would be very meaningful. You know, the other major thing is in the budget, and John, I think would concur with this, their salaries and benefits. And I think it'd be nice for John to explain to this committee how the city arrives at that competitive nature of keeping employees and retaining them. And so this committee kind of knows how they arrive at what amount of money is going to be needed, because those are the two big items that are variable, things like in budget.
Okay. So how does that look for the future? John, do you have any thoughts on?
Well, some of those are, those two that were mentioned by Mayor Emeritus, ex-mayor. I like that. Can we just call you X? Like we could talk 5-year capital projects at the next meeting, because Dave and I and the team go through it once a month and talk about it. So it's easy to bring that in. Salaries and benefits is another one that it's fairly easy to come in and say, here's the trends. I'm still fine tuning every 6 months I look at it, and we're fine tuning a little bit, but it's better than it's been, meaning that other agencies haven't moved as fast as they have in the past. So we're not catching up as much. If that makes sense. So that's been a good thing. And then we could, go through have departments kind of assigned to come in and talk about the highlights. What are their goals, how they're accomplishing their goals, and then what are the major discrepancies? What I would focus heavily on is major dollar amount changes as opposed to percentage changes. Because if it goes from $100 to $200, that's going to be less significant than, 5,000 to 6,000. And like in planning budget, that, $1,000 jump is a lot, but in the streets or motor pool budget, that's not a lot. And so I think that there'd be a little bit of scale that we could talk about for the individual departments, understanding that doesn't mean that, we're not going to worry about stuff, to Brenda's point, because part of the reason that we end up with a very healthy general fund balance is we don't spend every penny that's budgeted every year, and they add up to the savings that we use for the future. So
Maybe.
most of the
There's,
time.
no, I'm just saying there's some bills online in the House or Senate. I can't remember which one. That was like, if you haven't, you can't plan for anything left over, and I can't go and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? Anyway, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the legislature currently and having only 25% instead of 35% maximum amount you can keep. A lot of weird stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So today it's 3:18. Do we want to go into police stuff, or do we want to pull the pay stuff in, or?
So I've got like the yellow sheet queued up, so we could talk about what they are for those of you who are new, so that when you get them, you kind of understand the way that we treat them, if that would be helpful.
They all got all the ones from last year, so they should, if
I
they
have a
haven't.
question, who gets sprayed for drinking beer?
Who gets what?
Isn't that beer tax wages?
Oh, it's DUI wages, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. But yeah, so every time someone buys a beer, a little bit of alcohol tax gets attached that goes to DUI enforcement. So we get a grant from the state that pays for those extra shifts. So, but so the way the sheet is set up is at the top, it'll tell you the fiscal year that we're talking about. When we're talking about fiscal years, we'll say the 26 fiscal year, meaning that's the June that we end the year in, as opposed to where we start. So we'll either say 25, 26, or we'll just say fiscal year 26. And then every department, which is in the top left corner, is assigned a GL code. Police starts 10-54. And then all of these 3-digit codes are almost universal for all departments. Not every department has every code, but every department that has a uniform allowance, the 3-digit code's 140. So another department would be like 1042 140. And we do that so that we can, as we're tracking, we kind of can compare against other departments to see how everyone's performing. But what the department heads do is, we used to just get this number, and that's all council ever saw. We've now added the details to say, okay, we're not just spending $885 on subscriptions and memberships. 400 of it's going to the chief and the 2 lieutenants, for their dues for the Chiefs Association every year. And we started breaking it out, so there's a lot more transparency and conversations about it at the level with the finance director and department heads.
It's about as close to zero based as you can get, or
You know, the one thing I would say is that as you go down the column, so if you go back to fiscal year 23, these are what was requested that year. It's not necessarily what was spent or what was awarded. Or, you know, by awarded, I mean budgeted by the council. But you can see it grows, and some sheets actually they should all be this way where it, you know, it's kind of in descending order. But just make sure you're looking at the top column. The furthest one, or the one that's the first white column, should be the one that's being requested for in the most recent year, which the one that we're currently operating under is 26. As these get updated, then there'll be a new column that gets added, you know, that's an FY. I can type. See, I can't type because people are watching. So we'll add a fiscal year 27 and do new calculations, and every department head has to go in and make the decision. Do I want to ask for those same things again? That was the wrong one. And then we'll make the math work, right? So these cells will now create a new total, but they'll go in and say, oh, you know what, chief's dues went up. So maybe the new number is 420 for the 3 people. And they go through, and a good example is Bryce with our IT department, who also is our front office manager. He goes through every computer in the city, or he has a list and says, these are the ones that most likely need to be replaced. And then he'll go and talk to each department head and say, how's the computer doing? You know, what do we need to do? What do we need to plan for next year? So, and he'll go in, it's in the small equipment line. So you can see he's gone through, and there's 4 detective and administrative laptops that are being replaced in the current fiscal year. So that number will change for next year. More than likely it'll drop down. And he's done a good job of showing what he pays per laptop. So police laptops are more expensive because they're a tougher machine, and they're supposed to last 5 years. You can see the patrol laptops are even more expensive than the office laptops, because they do get abused. They're taken in and out of the cars, and they have some extra security things on them. And then so you can see that Bryce does a really good job of just kind of breaking it out. And so Bryce, for example, does this kind of IT small equipment for each department, and then the department heads inserted into their sheets. And then the other thing too is the yellow sheets are only expenses. All of the revenues come from the finance director, in talking with the department heads, but a lot of the revenues come from the conversation with the council. And that might be another thing that this group could weigh in on is, you know, our projected revenues, in particular sales tax, and what may happen in the coming months and years. Because that's the most volatile money we get. It's also the largest pot of money that we get, if you remember from our conversation last time. So, excluding utility bills. So, most of what we seem to center and focus on in these discussions is general fund. So we do want to plan to have enough time to talk about the utility funds, because if you look at our residents, the majority of the money they pay goes through the utility accounts. And so it'd be helpful to give that plenty of time, particularly as we look at the 5-year capital plan and we're looking at staffing and other needs, because those funds operate more like a business. So we have to have our revenues match our expenditures a little closer, to make it work.
And the solid waste contract is this year?
Yes. Yeah. So we've got in fact, I'm meeting with Republic tomorrow, Dave and I, on the numbers they're proposing for, potentially an extension as opposed to a rebid.
Just gotta figure out the transfer station thing.
Yeah. And the transfer station is going to be part of that conversation too. In fact, she might have more information for us, because Republic is who we use, and Republic is who the county's talking to about, I think, taking over the transfer station. So
Interesting. Sorry, yeah, there's all these little things going on at once, and so, but I think, yeah, I don't think we did any really big deep dives on those in the past years. And so I think that's important to understand that, like you said, the big chunk of, your taxes for North Ogden aren't as great as all the utilities that you're paying for. So
Yeah, I think the average utility bill is like 90 to 95 with the new utility, the transportation utility fee. It's going to be at over 100. So, you've got, 700,000 or $70,000 worth of money coming into the city every month through utilities, and that ends up being more than what comes in property tax.
What month is that is that gonna be on?
So it'll be on the bill at the end of this month. So first time it'll be paid is in when people get for their March payments, but it's technically for February's bill.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
any questions about this?
I can't remember.
And
We've done enough.
police is a good one because it's one of the longer, more complicated. To put it into perspective, so this is what you may call their discretionary amount when you take out salaries and benefits
And vehicles.
and vehicles. Well, actually, some of the vehicles are in
Isn't it?
here. Oh, they're not because they're all in motor pool.
Yeah, that's
Okay. But when you start going through some of these things, a good example is the forensic services. It starts becoming not super discretionary because we have to have someone who helps us with our forensic services, or we have to do it ourselves. And so, do we pay the county $49,000, or do we hire someone to do it ourselves? And that's where it starts you get some of those nuances. We have some agreements like for SWAT and Strike Force, where we either pay them or we send an individual to participate for 2 years. And so there's just some of these decisions, even these yellow sheets, have been made. So here's the transfer to motor pool. So there's almost $500,000 that goes to motor pool to cover depreciation on vehicles, new vehicles, and then the maintenance that they require. So again, you take that $1 million, and now you've just sliced it in half of vehicles. Some of the stuff that this group's talked about in the past is the sharing of vehicles, options, things like that. Again, those are kind of some policy questions that are great to talk about and give suggestions to the council. Police will tell you sharing vehicles doesn't work. In Utah, it does in some other areas, but a lot of those areas, they have 2 officers assigned per vehicle. I mean, think of all the great cop movies. There's always 2 officers in a vehicle, right? Because that's where all the dialogue happens. So, but a lot of the big cities, they work in pairs, and so they share vehicles. Dave has a comment.
Just to give you an idea, so like 96,000 sounds like that's a lot of money for maintenance, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. So like this year they did 4 cop cars, and so part of doing the 4 cop cars is our guys upfit all of their cop cars. So we get a blank police car, our guys go in and put all the lights in, the sirens, all of that stuff. So it's that part of it, but it's also just buying all the sirens, the lights and all that. So that just gives you an idea. If you were looking at that and being like, that's a lot of money for maintenance, but it kind of entails all of that part.
And most cars are, depending on whether it's a undercover or some, I mean, it's $7,000 to $15,000 worth of equipment per vehicle. So
before I forget, you're talking about the county stuff, and a lot of those increases are pass-throughs, meaning we have no control over it.
Yeah, the control is in theory, the council signed an agreement that said we will pay you, and here's the escalator that happens each year. Sometimes it's predictable, sometimes it's not. Right now they're renegotiating the school resource officer contract, where we provide an officer to the Weber County school system during the school year, or at least to the junior high. And this year the ask is, I think, $205,000 from the county school, Weber County, to pay us for that officer, which has not been met nicely yet. But Nate's over there. Nate is one of our LTs who's negotiating it for us. So he's out there with the other every other city that has a Weaver County school in it, junior high or high school, is in the same boat as we are, where we provide an officer and they reimburse us expenses.
But even like for the animal shelter,
The animal shelter.
that's another one too.
Yeah, it was a decision made by the council in 2010 to sign that agreement, and we're on the hook till next year. Is that when the bond gets paid off? Yeah, 27. So, but yeah, so and that's where like the discretionary starts kind of falling out, because some of those decisions have been made by previous councils that have obligated us to some things, not necessarily in bad ways.
No.
Because
But it's just you're not obligated, you're not controlling that cost, and so that's what I just keep calling it a pass through, because we don't have control to either make it more efficient or not. It's just a number that
Yeah.
you get to pay.
yeah,
Kelly.
On the, refresh my memory, but on the depreciation. Vehicles, used to be like 50 or 55 plus now, as I believe. And there's like, some years there's 5 vehicles, right?
yeah,
So you'll see that depreciation number bouncing around based upon cost of the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Any given year.
yeah. I think when I first started with the city, being involved in the budget process in like 2014, I think vehicle like a police cruiser, or the SUVs we use were like 35 grand, and now they're 50, 55. Just with how costs have gone up in the past 10 years. So, and then the equipment is not necessarily more expensive, but some of the equipment, the reason I said it was 7 to 15 is sometimes the equipment from the one vehicle that's being swapped out is moved into the new unit, because some of it'll last 2 rotations or 10 years on a car, as opposed to just the 5 years. But there is some equipment that will only last 5 years. Like the cages, we don't put old cages in new cars. That's right. Yeah, the models don't fit. Yeah. And the cages where the individual who is being guided to the police station or sits. That's
Guided.
Transfer.
offered.
Moving
Yes.
forward.
The Uber cage. Yeah. So any questions on the yellow sheets?
Were you discussing yellow sheets in general?
I mean, they're all
Or are we
got this
discussing the
format, right?
police yellow sheets right now?
Well, so I think with your idea that the chief would come in, and in this column, it gives you an increase. So like this year, for example, there was a 90% decrease on subscription and memberships. And that's a large enough dollar amount and percentage amount that it'd probably be helpful for this group to understand why. If I remember correctly, it's because they moved some of their,
It's right in the notes.
So it's reclassing.
okay, yeah.
It's moving it.
So they moved 8,400 to training out of subscriptions and memberships. So, and that's what we've asked them to do, is keep these notes good. So as the sheets get updated, then that will help. But I think it'd still be helpful for them to come in and talk. And if you think of the yellow sheets as a way to drive the policy discussion, then they'll be very helpful. If you think of it as a way to go into the weeds, it'll be problematic. Not to pick on any past council members, because none of them are in the room, but so they're not here to defend themselves. But there was a time where we were talking about yellow sheets, and a line had gone up 100%, and it was $100. And so we talked about it for 5 minutes, and then the next line had gone up like 2 or 3%, but it was like $50,000, and we just glazed right over it.
Yeah.
So I think dollar amount, again, sometimes is a better measure of what's worth an impact, as opposed to.
So you're talking about policy things on this whole thing, and I think one of them, Dave kind of mentioned it, is that we install the cars, or we do the stuff on the cars. Is it more efficient to have an outside source do it? I mean, just that would be the policy difference is, if we are outsourcing, is it better to do it in-house,
Well, exactly, because that's a great example on because then the chief or Dave could provide the information on, here's the things we've tried in the past, which is why we've landed where we're at. Or sometimes we said, oh, we've never thought about that. And so we've looked into it and then brought back a recommendation from staff to the committee so that you could make a recommendation to the council.
Another thing would be like, oh god, you first.
I was just gonna say, and for the staff, they use it as a measuring tool too, so like, give you a perfect example of the stormwater department, they have the sweeping contract in there, right? And so we've actually always used that as like a measuring, like, because at one point we talked about adding a third person into the stormwater department. So by the time we took their salaries, their wages, upgraded our sweeper, we found that having that contract with the sweeping company, it's like, we've always been able to measure and say, is it worth looking into a third person, or should we stay with this contract because it's something like that?
Same thing with outsourcing of engineering for water, I think it was.
Yeah,
Where they stay certified, they stay up to date. You don't have to have an employee that does have that and pay them to do all that stuff. When you can just, you might have a couple of days or something, to get it done, but much more cost efficient. And I think that's the trade-off, is that you don't get immediate results for something that you can't control. And I was talking to Brian about this, the make buy decision that a lot of companies do, at least for what I've been a part of, is that there's a cost trade-off and there's also a time trade-off. Being OCD, not OCD, but type A, I want to control everything if I possibly can, but I think there is some more efficiencies that other people can do. Should the government be involved in schools or rec centers or other things like that will be much more efficient on the others, civilian side, of course, Brian brought that up, but that's the type of thing that, people want to, they want to have all these amenities, but is it really something the government should be doing, or is it better off to let, the civilian sector make it more efficient? Anyway, so, but the overall thing, and then another thing was, Bryce, being the guru for tech, but then that, there's is it tech serve? What's the, that,
Texter.
yeah, that comes in and does stuff but isn't Bryce still trying to figure out how to work better to?
Well, so it's like any job, you grow. And what we found is when Bryce first started, everyone was still calling TechServe for help. And gradually over the past 2 or 3 years, Bryce now gets the majority of the calls, which means we're spending less money on outsourcing it, round about 120 an hour. And so we've seen quite a bit of savings there. But he still needs a little bit of help because there's some stuff that, he hasn't learned yet, or we don't have the software to do yet. But I mean,
that high-end networking is really hard to do in-house.
yeah. And especially with the attacks, I mean, just to put it into perspective, this past year, I think we've had 3 fairly major attempts at getting into our system from, we don't know where, but, and so having that extra people who can come and help Bryce in a pinch has been really helpful. This year, we likely will be asking for it's called Arctic Wolf, software that watches our files. And if it sees a whole bunch of files getting modified, that usually means a virus has come in and it's encrypting it with a new code, and it'll call, send emails, and then lock the system down. But it's not cheap. But rebuilding a system isn't cheap either. So I think South Jordan, I think they paid $1 million to get the encryption codes, and they actually did get them. But Brigham City just said, we'll just rebuild, because I think they asked them for 2 or 3 million, and they said, we'll just rebuild. So.
And then, yeah, that's, in fact, my son's company, small company, the accounting firm, basically had somebody downloaded, not on purpose, but, clicked the wrong button and, everything went down.
Yeah.
And that's like, I guess I work for big enough companies, I don't have to worry about that, but yeah, I mean, we're not a ginormous company, so it does scare me, but.
And we've done some things. So we have a software we pay for that allows us to send phishing emails to try and trick our own people into clicking the links that we get sent. And it's made people more aware, because we don't like, not that Bryce doesn't tease us, but it's nice to kind of poke back at Bryce and be like, oh, you didn't catch me on that one. But the first time we did it, which is pretty similar in most organizations, there were, I think, 58% of the people clicked the link, 25% typed in their credentials type of thing. And the last time we did it, as far as like a citywide thing, it was less than 10% click the link and like one employee put in their credentials. So it's been getting quite a bit better. And it wasn't Casey.
This time, oh,
It wasn't my information.
Yeah.
okay. Is everybody getting, I just don't want to waste people's time.
So this is the
Here.
process, this is the police, there's a
Yeah.
process that is for everybody,
Right,
for every
yep.
department.
And I think the only thing that's not in here is the admin not set aside offset. That gets peanut butter spread at.
Some, it should be in this yellow side.
Right, but that's a moving target that happens and,
Yeah, it's a formula.
yeah,
It's really just a factor of, how much of the administration is
has to
working for
go
other
back and forth,
funds.
yeah.
And so a piece of that cost gets passed along to the other funds.
But that's not something they have to worry about in each budget year, yeah.
No, it's an in and out. It doesn't
Yeah.
really, if you think about it, it doesn't change the overall, revenue or expenses of the city. It just spreads it out more evenly.
Right, but I mean, I guess my point was that you will see it on the budget sheets, not the yellow sheets, but the main budget, you'll see this
Oh, yeah.
admin.
Yeah, you'll see that there, yeah.
So, and it says a bunch of references because this sheet doesn't have the salary in it. But what we're talking about is that we'll look at an individual and say how much of their time goes to the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, so that, and other funds, so that non-general fund entities are paying their share of the salaries and other stuff that benefits them as a whole.
When was the last time that was updated?
We look at it every year. But as far as a complete overhaul, it was 2 years ago, 3 years, Dave. I'm trying to remember.
It's probably been 2 years.
But I mean, you can see there's, 20 or 18 employees, 17 employees that are kind of shared across all departments, everyone from Peter to Dave to Victoria, who does our payroll. I mean, there's quite a bit. Even when you're talking about the Blue Stakes individual who's technically a general fund employee, the majority of their time is spent in the utility funds, not in solid waste, because we don't blue stake for solid waste because we know where all the trash cans are. But the 10% would be for roads, 40% for water, and then sewer and storm reach 25% based on our estimation of how much time they're trying to locate the different things. There's a lot more water lines in the cities than there is storm lines, for example. So
Got to change Eric's name now.
yeah, there's a few here, like Tiffany doesn't work. Tiffany Moore isn't with the city anymore. She was one of our utility billing clerks. Eric Casperson isn't here, so Brian isn't here. So we do update it every year and then double check the numbers before we do the final calculations that get injected in the budget process.
So did we go ahead and not rehire, but fill Brian's spot?
Yes.
Okay.
So Tyrell has taken over as the assistant public works director.
So everything's getting backfilled behind him? Okay.
Yes. There is one budget request that'll come, because Brian technically handled solid waste and was the city, the assistant. Tyrell now is doing all the capital projects and the assistant. So we had to backfill someone into solid waste. And what we've kind of lost is our floater position. So we had an individual who kind of just helped when we needed 3 bodies in a department that maybe only had 2. So we'll have to talk about how we can add that in the budget this year. So.
And are those percentages of times, those are your estimate of planned, or are those based off last year's actuals?
So this is our last year's actuals. This is what's currently in. But what we'll do, and I'll use Katie as an example, is we just look at how many employees are in a general fund department, and 85% of our employees are general fund. And so that's police, that's everyone in this building. It's the street people, the engineering staff, that sort of thing. And so this is just 7% of our employees are in water, 3% in storm, 3% in sewer, and 2% in solid waste. And so it's just it's a mathematical equation. Some of the others, and I'll use me as an example, as the city attorney, there's a little bit of, well, how much time do I spend with water? And like, I spend more time with solid waste than I do with water typically, just because of the negotiations with Republic and that process. And so some of it is kind of more of an art and less mathematical, but it is tied to some sort of logic that we go through each year.
Like finance is probably based upon how much dollars go through
Mm-hmm. There is a lot of it that's based on AP. So I think general fund, but water and sewer are quite high because of the processing that goes on for there, as opposed to stormwater. And solid waste, it's pretty straightforward. So it's really kind of it's somewhat mathematical, but a lot of it's an art. And like Bryce is a good example. We kind of say, how much time are you spending where? And he'll kind of break up his average week. And, right now, less than half of it is general fund. And he's spending a lot of time with the technology and the utility departments, helping him dial stuff in. And it's not because they're breaking stuff. It's just because some of their stuff is a little more finicky.
All of this 5 is probably all.
So if you just use numbers of computers, it wouldn't really capture a good sense of where his time's being.
Yeah. So,
That was helpful. I hadn't seen that before, so.
okay.
What else?
I got a question.
Here, yes,
I'm the new guy here.
a lot of new people, anyway.
Yeah. Where do you see the citizen committee helping the elected officials?
Where or how?
How?
How-
What scope, range, powers, responsibilities?
Anything related to the budget, anything is on the table. So, and policy too. You can recommend, hey, we don't need 23 police, we just need 4. I'm making crazy stuff up, but can you get down on the ways? Do we really need parks? Do we really need to mow the parks? They should be fine. Do we need playground equipment? All of those things, there's nothing that's off the table. Brian Bartholomew was one of them that just kind of just cement in the pool. We don't need that, so I mean, there was a lot of things that started coming up that are like, hey, he's like, we don't need parks. We got trails right over there. So there's nothing off the table. So I think,
Is that why he's no longer here?
no, well, now he's the president, so, yeah.
Pay to play philosophy.
Yeah,
He really is in the cost accounting. Like he wants to charge more for people who gets more snow. Which is, in my opinion, I love Brian, but
it's
trying
hard
to
to,
manage and figure that out just doesn't work based on who gets how much snow. But that's a philosophy that this committee could say, hey, we like that. Let's look at everything we do and see if there's a pay to play philosophy. You know how difficult that would be, Jack, but those are the type of things that
But well, I guess it also goes
Maybe
to,
good thing.
should we focus more on auditing each department, every line or item in the spreadsheet? Or should we look more at overall policies, like all departments? And maybe we should focus this way instead of that way, as opposed to every line item on the spreadsheet.
right, and that's kind
That's
of,
gonna take like
Yeah.
1,000 times more time and effort than looking at overall policies and directions for the city and their expenditures.
that's what everybody's saying, at least, well, last year and a little bit of this year, so. And I think nothing says that you can't go line by line. In fact, I highly recommend it. Sometimes it's a little eye opening to see
If it feeds
what,
into the overall
right,
policies and procedures.
if you're, this is a side issue. you know, if you don't like the flock cameras, how much the flock cameras cost, you know, and do we need to, you know, anyway, is it cost trade-off? Is it really worth it? All on the table, you know, that type of thing. If you have I see it. If it's something that you want to discuss and maybe others, somebody, hey, I don't like that either. You know, so that's why you guys are here to come up to a different perspective, different ideas so that the city can figure out, you know, oh, it's not a bad idea. And that's why staff sits in on these things. Cause like, ooh, I like that. I'm just gonna go do that because there's some purview that they have to just go do stuff if they see a good idea. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, I just to acknowledge that you saw me was great. A couple opinions on that. I think what we can do as a committee is if we want each individually to go through each line. And then when it's, say, the police department's gonna be here, if we have specific questions, whether it be overall or each line, we can ask those.
Yep.
But they don't need to take the time to go through each line. And my other opinion on how this committee helps the council, if nothing else, it lets the council know that there are residents that are concerned and we are watching. I mean, to me, if that's the only thing that this committee performs, I think that's enough.
Yeah, my seat gets hot when you start talking, so.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
I remember that.
Why is this?
I think as a committee on the policy side, though, we have to be cautious. Because membership on this committee, you're not here to drive policy. We're here to put another set of eyes on the budget.
But you still can, if the policy changes the budget.
Right.
Yeah.
But the caution that I have is that if I'm a person that you brought up flock, if I'm a person that doesn't like flock and I want flock to go away, this committee is not the mechanism to do that.
No.
Going right to council, and that is the mechanism, not coming here and saying, I don't like flock as a policy. I want to change that policy and I want to use the budget to change that policy. I think that's an inappropriate use of this committee.
True, but that's just an example of
Yeah,
something
I'm just,
if there's a cost trade-off that you can identify and not prove, but have somewhat of a.
Sure.
Hey,
Balancing act.
balancing it, right,
Between
and so,
priorities. So the flock, if we're eliminating the flock camera on the whole system would benefit pools and rec, for example. And that's where the priority is for the community. And maybe we should go that way.
and that's, yeah, I think that's where you're going is that.
Not
some kind of
necessarily,
priority.
I have an axe to grind about this particular issue, so I'm gonna come here and do that. An overall view of big ticket items are going to either increase or decrease overall out of pocket for the community members.
Yes. Next.
seats getting warm again. Here comes.
Uh,
I a little bit disagree because I think if I'm concerned about flock and how much money it is, I think this is the place to bring it up. And in the department, when the police are talking about it, so then it can be explained what the program is. And so that we understand it, then we can make a suggestion whether or not we want to say, I think you're spending too much money. But I personally think this is where you bring up those kind of things. Because I, as one person, can go and say to city council, I don't like flock. That's not going to mean anything. But if we as a group discuss it and say, okay, the police tells us what the benefits are, and we can look at that and half of us say, okay, it's worth it, and half of us don't, then maybe that can be a representation or a suggestion to the city council of whether we choose to support it or not.
I
Council
think what I was,
gonna gather more weight than individuals standing.
That's what I believe, yes.
She was first, go ahead.
And this is what I want to talk about. As this is a much bigger group than last year and we've learned in the past, can we just say you need to raise your hand and be called on because we had?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. that's-
I mean, it may sound childish to some of you, but the first year it was, I
Hey,
mean.
they
Chaos.
did that at city council.
We tried.
Sorry to be rude.
You didn't raise your hand, that's
I
right.
know.
Just,
That's the
that's,
point,
that's,
you know.
that's a ground rule.
it's a good ground rule.
Thank you.
I agree with you. The point I was trying to make is that there's a difference between the discussion is is the benefit we get from something worth the money we spend? Versus I have a philosophical problem with something and I want to eliminate it regardless of how much it costs. It could cost $1 and I don't want it.
Gotcha.
And using this committee to forward my philosophical desires, I 100% agree that we look at flock or anything else, the pool, whatever, and we say, okay, this is how much we're spending. Is the value we get out of it as a city? Do we feel like that's a worthwhile expenditure? Maybe yes, maybe no. But to say like, oh, I won't, you get what I'm saying.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Mr.
You know, just going back to, I think this is the 4th year. The reason this committee was created is for transparency. Because you have a good portion of the community that thinks government just takes their money and
We don't know how to budget.
and
That was a lot
throws
of-
it away. So, you know, there's that general feeling out there in the community that government is not accountable for the funds they receive. So citizens were invited to look at that. Say, you know, do you see any place that we're not being accountable with money? I think the important thing is here is that as committee members, you leave having as great understanding as you can, because you'll hear numerous times the council say, you know, our budget was reviewed by the Citizens Budget Committee, and they have not come back with any, you know, flinging money
That's right, yeah.
away. So I would hope that, you know, it's transparency and that, you know, you can walk away from here having a feeling that is the city accountable or isn't it accountable? You know, everybody hates property taxes. It's the worst tax in the world, frankly. But until somebody can come up with another way to fund government.
Yeah, so we're gonna
stuck with
do
it.
tariffs. I thought about that.
We're stuck with it. So that was the reason for the
Plus it you first.
the creation of the committee is, you know, city wants to be transparent. They want a representative number of citizens to look at it and say, hey.
So Mayor Berube, over the last 4 years, you mentioned that this has been enforced or allowed to happen, the council. What kind of changes can you point to specifically where this council helped guide the city council to choose something different, to maybe reduce their overall expenditures or eliminate programs and policies? How did this council change the direction of the elected city council?
Minimal, I would say.
But they have, and I sent the thing, I guess,
You
what I
ready?
can do,
I just can't.
I'm the chair, I can do whatever I want.
I think we elected a chair, didn't we? He's not here.
He's gonna answer your question. He's gonna answer your question.
What was the question again? I'm just kidding.
He asked what
Yeah.
suggestions had the council.
Cause I emailed what year to year changes were, I think. But I don't think I wrote in what was changed, or what was at least thought about or implemented. I'm trying to remember if Phil's notes had that or not. I basically stole your stuff, but what I can do is go back to the minutes and say what was or wasn't. I mean, that would be the only way to formally do it, unless it's just off of my memory, but go ahead.
Well, I just pulled that up, and the one that there are a couple on here that, one is the city magazine.
Yes,
Right? This committee was very much in favor of getting rid of the city magazine. Council happened to be in favor of it as well, but it was a decision that this committee made to recommend to council, we support getting rid of the magazine and dishing out information in another way. The other one that crossed my mind was, I don't think we've exited yet, but I think we are, is flash vote.
use it or get rid of it, I think was the recommendation.
Yeah, use it or get rid of it. I mean, that's 10 grand a year, isn't it? It's annual.
It was,
The total contract.
the total contract was
3
10,
years.
yeah.
But still, it's a, $3,500 or so expenditure every year. And those were two pretty significant things. There were some other,
I'll just make a note to go through that.
some other things on here. there was some discussion about flock and live scan fingerprint programs and things like that. But, yeah, while it hasn't been a huge financial, I think that's more a reflection of how well the council is already doing and the departments are already doing at budgeting versus, us coming up and finding those sneaky expenditures.
Sorry.
No, it's
I-
good.
From my experience, the biggest thing this committee has done is helped me to understand the money coming in and the money going out, how I feel about it, and how I talk to my friends and neighbors about it. Because
It's,
we have a total lack of understanding of how the city runs its money.
yeah, I'm the person in my extended fit, I have to keep explaining to the extended family. And then they can explain it to their neighbors. And so that's kind of the web that we're trying to create, is an understanding for the haters online. It's like, yes, we have a concept of what we're doing budget wise, and we don't just raise taxes every year just cause. And the mayor, just because he used to, he did have a Mercedes, but that's a different story. Yeah. But, when Dave gets his Lamborghini, then we can start talking about things. But so that's the kind of almost, your understanding of how the city runs and works and the ins and outs of it is really the whole concept of trying to do this. So,
Well, and one thing, and it goes to the yellow sheets and why we are trying to shift away from spending all our time on those, is we've done it 3 years in a row and found some savings, but it's the policy decisions. And I always pick on recreation because it's one of those that there's very strong feelings about, but the city's not required to have a recreation department. We choose to, or the council chooses to. And so that's the kind of stuff that if we're talking programs and those high level policies, then there could be a significant amount of savings. Just like a few years ago, we combined Parks Department into Public Works for as far as supervision did, and ended up eliminating 2 full-time positions as a result of it. And saved, $300,000 a year that went into other spots. But it's those kind of policy decisions that this group can, if you can kind of workshop and grassroots, if it came from this group, that's helpful for the council, because you can spend a lot more time than they can in a city council meeting.
yeah, and even ginormous topics like. No one was talking.
Okay. It's been so long that I forgot how I was gonna finish my discussion. However,
So glad. Anyway.
for instance, and this is, I think, some of the things that are somewhat policy that could come from this group that would be helpful to the council. And this is not, I know, a popular thing, but the council never deals with an issue that's been in this city for years. And that is the fact, their what's it called? Not compensation, it's,
Their stipend.
Stipend?
has not been addressed
Pittance?
for how long, John?
It's been the same for 20 years.
And nobody runs for the money because it's not that great. But what does it say about a city when somebody's looking at it and see, what the council is being, their stipends are? I mean, I'd look at it and say, who's running this place? And so, this group could say, hey, what a lot of other cities do is they say, okay, we're gonna get the council competitive compensation, but then they get the same adjustment as the employees every year. Then it doesn't have to go on, if this group, because it's hard for the council to do it to themselves, right? But if it's a group that says, hey, we want to make sure we've got the right people doing the right thing on the council, because you got 3 people that basically control the money in this city. It only takes 3 people to vote for a major tax increase, a minor tax increase. And you want people who understand, it's getting complicated, isn't it, Phil, from where it was?
Quite.
It's very complicated, but things like, that, could generate up from this group. And I know there's probably some on this group that are here to say, hey,
Should be free.
how do we reduce property taxes, right? You know, how do we reduce that? Boy, I hope somebody could come up with an idea. It'd be fantastic. But, you know, things like that, it's a policy, but it's something that could generate up from this group. John has a study. You know, we always used to get questions about benefits for the city employees. You know, we did a study to make sure that we're just not out of the world, that we're just being, you know, competitive with those around us. And, you know, it's a retention strategy. Those things all come into play. So I'm just throwing that out. I know it's not a popular idea. You know, I know the council pretty well. I don't think the money's what motivates them, but at some point in time, you know, you need to look at the city and say, you know, we're professional or we're not. What's our take here? Just
Yeah.
my thought.
And the big point there is,
Just as an idea
yeah,
of general things that, you know, I used to say when I was in business, so I'd always ask the questions, and I think this came out one time. You know, what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? There might be some things we're doing we shouldn't be. What aren't we doing that we should be? And then the things that we decide we ought to be doing, is there a better way to do it? And, you know, there's a lot of automation that's come out now that, as I used to say to John, if this city goes to 45,000 people, you can't double the employees. You gotta figure out how to work, you know, smarter using, you know, different tools. But I just thought out as an idea of things that could come from this committee. Cause they're not gonna do it.
wow. Anyway,
It did good.
Well, it's tough, because you're sitting here raising property taxes, right?
Then you're gonna ask for more.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, but, you know, there's a difference in my mind between an expense and an investment, right? An investment, you get some kind of return. And, to me, when you got 3 people controlling a general fund budget of 11 million, John,
Yeah.
and total budget of over 30, you probably ought to make sure you have competent people doing it.
well, like you said, it's a popularity contest in the end. So anyway, moving on.
So
So,
that's all you did is win a popularity contest.
but now, I know, are you done over there so I can talk? Or you good?
I don't know, you owe me some time because you made me wait so long.
boy.
I forgot what to say.
So there's an audit report too, that if you're a crazy person that wants to get into some more kind of ethereal things, one of the things that you'll find in the overall budget is interest to the new building. And I think the mayor and I kind of, you know, I'm like, pay it off early, why not? But if you look at the interest rate, you'd be a fool to pay it off early, because it's like, I think now it's like 1%. You know, combined with the two together, you know, 1 or 2% tops that you're paying interest on. And, you know, I think you have to plan for it. Like if you have extra money, put that in air quotes, where should you put it towards? You know, saving 2%, or yeah, I argue with my wife all the time because she wants to have a mortgage of 2.25. She's like, oh, we need to pay that off. I'm like, but you could make more money putting that money into a savings account or money market account and get 5%. Anyway, there's a long drawn out story on that, but I think that's the same thing with the city. We were using some of the extra money Casey was going back and forth into 6 or 7%. What was some of the things we were getting off of?
Yeah.
So we were literally making money on that money before we paying it back to the building. So anyway, I think but that was my thought. If you don't have ideas to go, hey, maybe we should do this. Hey, maybe we should, you know, hey, let's put a pool or a bubble on the pool. You know, just grandiose things that may or may not stick, but why not bring them up? Maybe they do stick. So.
I have a question. how is the city and do we have to get involved? Deal with the fact that you couldn't raise property taxes last year?
How do we get involved?
How? I mean, obviously there are some things that you must have planned on that you can't do now. Do we have to consider that?
Well, based on the last update that we had, it was able to kind of, I don't know, speak for Peter, but do some fine tuning to get it to well, not chopping off heads to get there. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I mean, we found some savings elsewhere to sort of help things out. I think it's beneficial, someone who's done budgets a lot, to go through this exercise of determining what the departments come to you and do this sort of like, song and dance about what they need so that you can really understand the needs of the city. And my guess is that those are gonna be more than what we can afford at the end of the day. And then you have that debate about whether or not, what's the appetite for, if we want to have everything we want, we have to raise taxes to the moon versus, what's that sort of negotiation that we feel comfortable with? I think that's a valuable exercise to go through as part of this group. But you do the discussion around expenditures first and what the needs are, and then you have that negotiation between what you want to do and what you can afford. So we'll have that discussion, when we're done with this about what we can afford, and then we'll probably have a discussion about tax rates at that point. What did you say, John, after?
Chris? Can I just add something? Because I think Jack has a good point. If there was $132,000 of stuff that wasn't needed, why'd we approve it?
Yeah, if we can absorb it without addressing it again.
Well, and there was, as I recall, John, a list of why we had to increase property taxes. Last year, it started at 9, and I think we reduced down to about 4.5. But I think Jack's got a good point. If it was stuff we didn't need and we just now can do away with it just like that, then why did we approve it in the first place? Because that ended up with the citizens facing a 4.5%. Because my understanding was, after looking through the budget, and Chris, you were kind of right by the side, is those weren't wants, those were needs. So I would like to see, to Jack's point, because, I heard this thing about, oh, we found all this money. We didn't find any money. We may have reclassified some things, but,
I just think you had to do without something.
well, if we didn't, why'd we approve it?
And I think the biggest thing, and I can hear you talking, but the biggest part of the whole thing is, to me, in the end, you're guessing at your revenue and you have a better idea of your expenses. But at the same time, Peter coming in, I'll say new, but he was new to the system, saw some stuff and he's like, hey, we didn't do that, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. And so there's some, expenditures or one of the words I'm talking about, but when you take certain expenses and when you take certain revenue, and it was more of a shell game than it was true savings per se, or doing without, at least for this time. But to your point, I agree that there should be every year, especially during tax increases, why did we come out 200 grand positive? Because I was looking at the audit report, which I recommend everybody looking at, because every year it shows this is what we had for the fiscal year audited number. This is what we got in the end. And if it's positive and significantly positive, why is that? That was my not concern, but why I was kind of digging into stuff is that year to year, if we have extra stuff that's just going to get dumped into the capital projects fund, well, good heavens, why didn't we know about that to begin with? And especially if we just raised taxes by 5% or something. You know, so that's to your point, I agree that each year we should, and that's kind of what I've been pushing. Each year that we have finalize this audit and get it done, and there is a difference between what we thought we were gonna have, you know, because we zero out the budget. You know, we have a balanced budget each year, and if we don't, either positive or negative, why? Am I addressing what you're talking about, kind of, sort of?
Yeah, but I think you're addressing it after the fact.
That's what we have to.
I mean, well, but this year you had to address it before the fact because all of a sudden there must be some things you plan to do that you can't do now.
Well, that's actually the case. We've tightened our belt, so it's not that, you know, we're doing everything we want to do. We've instructed the staff to cut back on some things, so, and a lot of that just depends on what property taxes, or no, sales taxes do, because they can swing in some really crazy directions and.
But my point is, if you can tighten your belt because you don't have it, why couldn't we tighten the belt before we got it?
Not ask for.
And here's a major difference that I've seen from government versus business. Is business first says, here's my revenue, here's what I've got to spend, here's my projected revenue. Government says, here's the expenses I need, then they.
Here's my
adjust
wants, yeah.
And I know revenue's hard to pay
Yeah.
sometimes.
And I mean, I get yelled at for trying to raise this, but anyway.
Yeah, well, you know, so like I say, I hope you're right for one sense. I hope you're wrong for another.
Because that goes to his point, is that if you're raising my taxes, because you're guessing at a revenue that could have been higher, and then, anyway.
Well, and one thing we tried to do in the city, right or wrong, is sales tax is so variable and the city became so reliant on that, that it would be in a real pickle if things fell off the table. So we tried to look more towards the stable source of revenue, which is property tax, right? Because when, I think, John, in 2008, what was it, a decline of, did you say 20%?
20%.
On sales tax?
Hmm.
So, I mean, that's a philosophy that may be right or wrong. I don't know, but that is a difference between business and government. Business always says, here's my revenues that I'm projecting. Now, how much do I have to spend for expenses? Whereas government says, here's my expenses, now I'm gonna adjust the revenue to get it.
Because we have the ability to adjust the revenue.
Yeah, and in business, you don't sometimes necessarily have that ability.
Yeah.
This is just kind of a personal from me to the council. Residents knowing that our taxes didn't get raised and the city's done just fine without. You guys decide to raise this year, you're gonna have a fight. You need to make sure you absolutely have defined why the property tax needs to be raised if we did fine without it.
Didn't have to be, because I think the capital projects was funded from last year's excess revenues. So 300,000 that we budget has really already been funded for next year.
But the biggest problem, I think, to everybody's point, is that if you take away, I hate to even put this out on the table, is that if you take away an amount from one person and give it to the other, it's brutally hard to strip it off that person and put it back. I mean, look what happened with sidewalks. We had 100, because we wanted to push sidewalks and safety. We had pushed it up 100 grand. And the following year, it just got, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it was like, it wasn't there. And so I think the point is that in capital projects is one of the biggest things. If you don't literally have a funding line in there for 200 grand, well, that 200 grand goes somewhere else. And I think that's why one of the things we wanted to push on the transportation fee, not make it a property tax, but also just make it a fee, is because if up or down that thing goes, it's going to evaporate into something else. If we don't use it for roads instantaneously. But anyway, just my thoughts. Sorry. Was there something behind me? No, okay.
I'm waiting for you to acknowledge me.
We'll get up,
You haven't said I could speak
we'll
yet.
get up to the table.
Come on. No, I hear what everybody's saying, but I think we also have to consider it's a philosophical discussion that you hear in government across the countries, you know, at the municipality, the county, the state, the federal. Do we want to survive in that we're eating ramen for every meal, or do we want to be healthy? And what it costs to be healthy is different than what it costs to just survive. And there are some governments who are fine with just surviving. Councils make that decision. It's a policy decision. And somewhere in there is the decision that council ends up making is at what health level do we want to be existing? We can be the bare minimum, skin and bones. We certainly don't want to be over bloated, but somewhere in between those two extremes is what I would call the best place for the city to be. And so I think that's some of the discussion that we end up having is, you know, to Jack's point, yeah, there were things that we, you know, instead of eating meat and potatoes and vegetables at every meal, we ate ramen at every meal. We still ate every meal, but we're not as healthy as we would have been if we had had those other things. And that's where council, I think, has to make that ultimate decision to say, how healthy do we want the city to be? And just kind of look at it from that perspective.
I understand your point.
Yeah.
But I also believe that sometimes, the citizens need to help to redirect the priorities.
Mhm.
I mean, departments can be healthy, but do we need all the departments, for example?
Oh, exactly.
Do we need, can we give, remember back to when Thomas Jefferson was running his all kinds of different things, but he was doing it out of his own paycheck. He went bankrupt serving the country. Then after that, the Constitution was changed to allow for, or amended to allow 175,000 at this point for every congressman and senator. So it's constitutionally mandated and directed and limited for the income of the elected officials. So I can understand that point too. But then again, when we elect officials, you're talking about being you're electing your favorite person, not necessarily the best person for the job. So if it's the hiring position, you're hiring the city lawyer. Needs to be a specialist in that, so the workman's worthy of his hire. If it's elected official, they need to have $175,000 a year to show to the other cities that, hey, we're good. So just different perspective on different things. But when it comes to saving money, we don't have to continue to grow the budget. Maybe we can, instead of focusing on asking all the department heads to come and says, what's my wish list? Maybe we can give them all department, let's say 5% per year or 3% per year decrease over the next 10 years. Different perspective. Just retired after 35 years of working for the federal government, Department of Defense, and we're taking different positions from uniform to contractor to civilian. And every year it's the same kind of thing. Department heads come up and says, here's my wish list. And they're all been told their whole career, if you don't spend your money this year, you're going to lose it. That doesn't help the taxpayer.
No. You were
Go
first.
ahead.
Now, my help point wasn't, you know, to badmouth that, but my in bringing that up is, do we have to address, how much of that do we have to address this year that we weren't gonna have to? I mean, we can say, yeah, we didn't need all that stuff, but that's not the case. Some of it that was planned to be funded, we still need to do. And so I'm just saying, I think that's part of our thinking this year is that we've got something to make up and not just to move forward.
Or you're eating into your food stores just so that you can not pay for something that month or whatever, but yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And I think maybe the departments, when each of them comes, they can tell us, this right here, this section is what we weren't able to do because we lost that increase last year. It would be nice if we could ask them that. But the reason I raised my hand was to comment on Trent's comment. I don't think the departments are coming here with a wish list. I think they're coming with a list of, this is what we need to do the job you want us to do. I don't think there's you know, we'd like this, we'd like that. I don't think that's, I think maybe we need to look at it as they're coming with their list of necessities. And maybe what they would like to make their jobs easier or more effective.
So if I can respond.
Yeah, sorry, writing.
And I didn't mean that as an attack. I know I speak brusquely and I need to be aware of that, so I apologize.
Brusquely, is that a new word?
Yes.
It's a.
Is it? I don't know. I haven't heard it myself.
You got it now.
That's fine. I'm learning new stuff every day.
So the intent was not, explicitly wish list so much,
Mhm.
but you understand the concept. Some of the department heads, they have their own, interests that they're trying to take care of. Now, are those interests in line with the overall city budget? No, that's what the city council helps to shape and guide. Sometimes their interests are growth, sometimes their interests are strictly, for example, road maintenance. They only have a certain number of people, amount of equipment, a certain amount of time. And they can't complete the mission they've been assigned. So that's what I meant by wish list. But sometimes the overall city council directions, priorities need to override the wishes or the desires or the goals and aims of each individual manager or department head.
Yeah. I'm gonna read it. I got it.
No, I got it too.
All right, go ahead.
An action done in a blunt, abrupt, or curt manner, often implying rudeness or a lack of courtesy. And that's why I apologize.
But it's spelled, just, if you're spelling it,
I didn't.
I know.
spell it, I spoke it.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is that I'm looking for a K, but it's BRUSQUELY. I learned a new word today, so there you go. Okay,
Or Chris?
yes,
Well, I did want to just answer your question because you asked and I said we found some savings. I want to be just a little more specific. That savings was last year's. We found savings in last year. So it's not this year that we've, tightened our belt on. It's because we had done a little better last year.
Yeah, and part of the reason I brought that up, because I realize that, that it probably all doesn't have to be covered, but there must have been some things in there that you
Yeah.
couldn't
Yes.
do.
Well, and
But
I don't know if she was next, technically.
No, go ahead, I'm off subject, so go ahead.
I think to Peter's point, and I mentioned it in my last comment, we did because sales tax came in higher than we'd anticipated, which is significant. So we had excess revenues over expenses that year that should fund that $300,000. Now, if we're chipping away at that and saying now we only have 200,000 left, or we only have 170,000 left, then the council's gonna be faced with saying, where's the other 130 come to get the 300 for capital projects? So my recollection is that not only were we kind of hoping for good property tax, but the budget last year said we may have to this year take out of fund balance to balance the budget.
This year does include a portion of that.
Thought we zeroed that
Yeah,
out.
so what happens is
Didn't zero out?
you don't find the money, you just take it out of fund balance,
Was it the
right?
20?
But
You don't want to get in the habit of doing it.
It's that shell game.
Yes.
that's the city savings account.
Right, it's the rainy
So you got
day,
extra bill, you gotta replace the roof, gotta come from somewhere.
or you have a big fire, or you have a flood. You have to have a rainy day fund, and so my recollection is that there was enough excess over last year to fund capital projects fund going forward.
And some of it is a shell game, and I wanna say that like it's transparency wise, everything is in the audit report, and I think that's the thing that if people can understand that, which is, it's horrible to read, and I apologize for all the accountants in the room, but
Have we got one for this year yet?
it's close, I thought,
Just got this week.
so, but anyway, sorry. go ahead.
yeah, but the thing is, we were fortunate to have that covered some way
Mhm.
by sale, I mean, it's a variable that we don't have much control over. Like you have control over whether you can raise property tax. Fortunately, it was covered. And I just think, citizens don't understand all of that. I mean, I keep hearing questions now.
I barely
What have we,
understand. I'll
what
say
have we
that.
been doing with the, you know, that we were gonna budget? What aren't we, what's the city not doing now? Because as a citizen, I don't know that. I'm just thinking, oh, if I didn't get property tax increase last year, it's gonna be double next year. But anyway,
Well, and that's just, you know, I use my wife a lot because she's a sounding board for a lot of things for when it comes to common citizen and
Why?
her wife. Anyway, so, and she's like, well, what are you gonna do next year? And I was like, fair put, like you're just saying. But I think the problem is that, right or wrong, many of the council's, council members' strong points is not budget finance stuff. And that's what scares the crap out of me. And it scares the crap out of a lot of the current people in there. You know, I don't want to badmouth Tara, but she's, you know, she's a business person and she's like, this is crazy. You know, I kind of was trying to get her up to speed on some of the budget stuff and she's like, holy cow. And so it is drinking from the fire hose. And that's the problem sometimes is that you get that deer in the headlights look. If you watch them during council meetings, that, you know, especially the budget process, and they're like this, you know, staring straight.
Sleep.
If they're asleep, we're in trouble. But, you know, listening to some of the budget stuff and
I was never.
go ahead, sorry. Let's get off this.
No, one of the interesting things that's happened over the last 5 years is that prior to the last 5 or 6 years, there was inflation every year. So even if we did nothing different in the city, there would be between a 2 and 5% increase in the cost to do it. And we were able to cover that cost because of a continued annual over expectation increase in sales tax. So we budget, I remember John in years back in 2014, 2015, 2016. As a council, we were thinking, okay, let's be conservative and we'll budget sales tax revenue an additional 7%, 8%, and it would come in higher than that. And so we were able to cover natural inflation with sales tax. About 5 years ago, that quit happening. Sales tax went flat. And we weren't getting that, but we were still seeing, you go back into COVID, you know, the consumer price index was a 9% inflation rate. Well, the municipal index was 13 and 14%. So cities were seeing a 14% increase in just base cost. And sales tax was flat. And all of a sudden you have this, and that's part of, I think, what former Mayor Berube was talking about, that we became so reliant on sales tax. And then when it went flat, we were in a world of hurt because we were relying on that just being this bag of candy every year that showed up, and then all of a sudden the candy wasn't there. And we had all these bills that needed to be paid and things that, you know, just base costs. And so the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years, really, budgeting has been a whole different game than before that because sales tax is just, I mean, it's about 4.8 million of
Yeah.
our budget right now,
Yep.
where sales tax is 2.3. Is that right?
3
We're right at
million. Yeah.
3 million. So, you know, that's huge.
Can I ask my question? Are we at the point of the meeting where we can ask stupid questions or we?
That's the whole meeting. What are you talking about? Go ahead. Yes.
They're hard, most stupid questions.
What are we discussing next meeting?
We,
And before you get into that,
yeah.
this is the stupid question. We have had no snow this year.
Mhm.
Maybe the snow plows went out one time. Twice, woohoo, I missed one. On the budget, can that money that's been budgeted for snow this year be rolled over to next year and next year until we need it again when we have a huge one? Or does it have to be turned into general fund?
Well, so it comes out of general fund and it's paid into general fund. And so we won't spend it on something else. So it'll go into general fund.
it's just part of the pot now.
Yeah.
So there's a rollover process. It's not just you start with 0 at the beginning of the year.
Well, it goes into that rainy day balance. And then we will try and budget our revenues next year to cover what we think it'll cost next year.
Okay,
But
but snowplow next year is not going to start out with a $2 million budget because we didn't use it this year.
no, it's not, so it's like 60,000, so it's not gonna start at 120 next year. Next year it'll be 60 again.
That would be the explanation on the audit for next year as to why there was a plus at the end of the year of 600K, because of one of the reasons was we didn't use snowplows for 6 months. Well, you know what I'm talking about, but.
Yeah.
Well, in regards to that, but there should be a property tax increase to cover the 60,000. If you track that kind of stuff,
You should,
that's where you can take money out of the rainy day fund because it was just a rollover. Instead of saying, oh, it's just gonna sit in there and we're gonna have 60,000 and put that into our revenue. To me, that's where you can start saying, hey, we have this fell into the rainy day fund. And now we're gonna use it in the next year, which is,
wait, I thought you said you couldn't do that. I was trying to do that one year. You didn't
like,
let me
you
do it.
can do that
Okay.
if you track it.
Yes.
But
Dave's gonna
the,
hurry me so we
No,
don't.
no, it's just, if you just have a rainy day fund and you don't have enough revenues to cover it and it didn't fall into there, you don't wanna start eating that away.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you tracked it, like Trent, if you said, okay, we budgeted 60,000, that was one of the reasons we had excess revenues over expenses and it fell into the general fund rainy day thing.
Yeah.
Then next year, you could utilize that as a supplement to revenue instead of increasing property tax.
Unless you're at your limit and you had to put it into capital improvement.
Well,
So I was just gonna ask, is there a limit to that buffer?
yes.
Well, there's a limit that we can have cash,
You can keep it.
35% of your revenues.
and they want to reduce it to 25, which for people that are smaller, that would crucify them. So.
Well, there's a lot of cities, John would tell you, that have no rainy day fund.
We're mandated to have at least 5%, and there are a lot of cities that are not much more than that.
Wow.
We've been pretty good.
We pegged it, I think, at 27%.
Mhm.
You know, in between what used to be the 25 and 35, we just said 27% of it would be enough for this city. To cover any unexpected.
But it's a limited thing. It's not like you could
But
fund the
how
city
they-
for an entire year.
But how they manage that is they can take that and transfer it to the capital projects fund if they have a 5-year, if they have an identified reason they can use it. So that's how
Take the excess or put in the other fund.
you can. But then if that's the case, that's what we said, is there was more than 300,000. So if there's a 200,000 excess that's scraped off into that, then next year you only have to put 100,000 in there to build it instead of 300.
And then the next year after that, you have to figure out where to come up with the 200. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I wish it was simple.
It's
Like a checking account, you can balance your checkbook, I mean, that the old days, I mean, that would be simple. Cause then you got a money market, but then there's like 17 different things they're trying to do, and Casey's trying to take it, make sure that he's making payroll and, covering this and covering that. And yeah, I try to understand it, and there's a certain thing you just I can't go that far down. I'm gonna stay at the budgeting level that I understand. And so, but there's a lot of thing, and the crazy part is, not crazy. The real reason that you hire the people that are smart is so they can tell the council what they really truly need. And instead of, I don't say questioning, but going, you don't know what you're talking about type of thing, because, you want to hire SMEs, right? Especially in government. Sometimes the government isn't SMEs, so they go to aerospace or somebody else to try to get something, and that's kind of what we do for offsite contracting for some of the, we can't do as a city efficiency, outsource.
And I don't want to prolong this, but Trent, in regards to your question, we have very confident, that was one thing I really felt good about, is that we had right people, the right.
I'm
seats on
not
the
saying
bus.
you don't, I'm just saying
But
the
no,
election process is different than the hiring process.
But here is the reason why you need competent city council members. I'm not saying we don't.
How do you
have them.
get those though? That's the problem.
Most of them are competent. Some are not. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Cause you're off. This was something again today, Dave will recall this, but they came one year and wanted a with the bucket truck, is it all the bucket?
Yeah,
truck?
yep.
And the quote we had was like 340,000, was it?
Yeah.
So a council member just happened to ask the question, well, could we rent something instead of buying that? So the research was done and found out we couldn't rent one because the demand was
So low.
They weren't there.
not when we needed it, and couldn't get one when you needed it. So we got on the phone and started calling around, and what did we end up finding one for?
About 100.
Because a council member just happened to ask a question, and then there was further research done.
Yeah.
And the council controls the purse strings here. I mean, they control the purse strings, and I'm telling you, I'm still trying to figure out some of the things that were decided. So it is important to have the right people in the right
So
spot.
we can get a new leaf truck. Anyway,
Mhm.
sorry, that's another joke. Not a joke, but
That
another
makes
issue.
sense that
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Seeing the, government being run from various, levels from federal government overseeing hundreds of millions of dollars of projects internationally in telecommunications to small community and what I've seen growing up since I was born here up in Mount Loma Drive. Till now, in the community changed a lot. That's maybe what has kind of skewed some of my perspectives on where we are now versus where we were when I was sledding down the hill into a rancher or a farmer's yard, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We didn't have all these parts. We didn't have all the equipment to maintain. We didn't have outhouses on the parks. We didn't have any of this kind of stuff, and we were quite happy. But then again, the kids today, you can't get them away from the screens, you can't get them outside to do anything.
Agreed. And I think, a lot of those perspectives is kind of what we're here for. So loving discussion. I think this is good. We're at 4:42. There's more we can talk about. We want to skip to what we're doing next time? I think two of the things that John mentioned, I think is fairly decent, but I don't want to get away from our schedule too. Is there a department head that needs to come first, or, so that we're ahead of what the council is making decisions on?
Council won't, it'll be, it'll be March before we go to council with the long-term salary, 5-year capital stuff. So we've got a little time.
Okay, so do you want to do that next time and then the meeting
Yeah,
after that,
there's
do the
just one
first,
meeting, yeah.
do the department head after that? Or start department heads after that?
Yeah,
Okay, and for the department heads, what I'd written down was changes in budget year to year, and I guess there was something else that we were talking about, the department heads were was it decreases, or what was decided on that? Was there anything else that we wanted to hear from department heads when it came to their budget?
Yeah, there was sorry,
No, go ahead.
there was something they weren't able to do because
That's what
of,
it was.
Because they didn't get funded.
yeah.
This current year.
But they did get funded because we had the tax increase from sales tax, right?
Well, I mean, that's,
So was there anything we didn't do?
I guess that's what we're
That's the
asking.
question.
Yeah,
And
I don't know if
That's
we
really
need
a
to know
question.
right now.
for
That's,
these guys, not department heads, if you guys funded from sales tax, if you funded everything without the property tax, without changing the budget, we're done. We don't need to ask them that question because it would have all been funded.
But if you told staff to squeeze something and they know what that squeeze is.
yeah, if they had to make some adjustment.
Yeah.
so the two things we did is we increased the balance to be appropriated based on the increased sales tax from last year. And then police, for example, they have been told, don't hire that position you're missing until you find the superstar. So they're not just picking up anyone that applies, they're being really nitpicky, and that the balance to be appropriated covered the 130, but then what we're trying to do with the police is now not use that 130, but we're actually down 2 officers right now.
But we built that in, remember, to Chris's point. Funding this year, we said, we usually come in 150,000 under budget. for some of the reasons you talked about. And so we built that into funding this year, is my recollection.
Yeah, that was just across the general fund in general. Yeah. But those are the cutbacks we've done, and then training, we've scaled back training.
But, to your point, is we used to get a lot of calls from citizens complaining about people's yards, dogs off leash, weeds, those type of things. And for years now, the police department has asked for additional community service officers, and they've been turned down 3 years in a row. So if this group feels that that's a citizen priority to keep, ordinances in check,
Those pesky little small signs on the corners.
the police have been asking for two, and they've been turned down now. Is it 2 or 3 years, John? So,
At least two.
Yeah.
so the point being is that they've asked for things in numerous departments they've been turned down on. But if it's to the point now that this group representing the citizens feel like enforcement of ordinances is important, then they probably ought to say, we're, either find the money from somewhere else or we're gonna budget for it, because citizens, it can drive you crazy. I mean, literally. In fact, I want to get on that snitch committee, John.
Too late. Oh, sorry.
And start finding people, and there's another source of revenue that's gonna be part of that person's salary. I know the city doesn't like to fine, they like to push towards compliance,
It's
but
good.
you can only do that. So, I mean, when you have people that walk into city council and say, yeah, I know I needed to get some, approval for this, and I just didn't do it because I didn't think I'd get caught. And I mean,
Mm.
no, when it's the same people whose yards look horrible and it's affecting their neighbors' home values,
Or they've been living in a house for
Yeah.
4 years and don't
if
have
there are fines on the books, what are they for if you're not gonna,
to agree.
that's one of my I think people needed to be fined into compliance, don't, because you can push them.
You and my wife would be good.
Send her over.
Glad to know you, Fred.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it drives her insane, so, anyway. Sorry, I'm always back to you, but.
So define again the
I'll
next.
poke you if I need
I know, that's
something.
why.
And what was
Salaries,
next week's?
5-year capital plan, and then, the employee analysis, basically, how staff does their yearly analysis of where people need to be to keep them, essentially. And
There's a
then
big problem with it.
to have to retrain somebody, yeah,
No, not cost, how about for retention?
Yeah,
Yes.
there was.
there was.
Big time, and a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
Big time because we used to pay at the 25th percentile. So everybody
For
else
the
was
state or every community similar to North
Similar.
Ogden.
Yeah.
surrounding communities and similar to us. That John will explain that. But we were the training ground for police officers,
Yeah, for quite a few years,
and
right?
it was costing us lots of money.
How dangerous was North Ogden?
Well, it's
It's
getting more
getting-
dangerous. I can tell you
And
that.
growing rapidly.
You'd be surprised at some of the calls our officers go on. Everybody in the
Was the
city thinks
murder
we're
rate
this,
skyrocketing?
domestic violence, big time.
That's always a problem, dangerous for the officer.
Yes, it is. Most dangerous call there is. But we used to have massive turnover in the city. Didn't we, Dave?
Yes.
25%,
Until we,
For police or all staff?
all staff.
the police officers were, it was just a revolving door. And, so,
Were they newbies coming in, never, only now been certified as a police officer?
it
Mhm.
was,
Or were they career officers that says I can get paid better somewhere else? I just waited for
initially
that
they
hot
were,
dope.
they were newbies that get their, but we were losing all kinds of officers. And as a council, I think you were on there, we decided we're gonna pay at the 50th percentile.
Yeah.
We're gonna be competitive because retaining them was a lot cheaper than training these officers and comparing safety. And as John would tell you, even our Water One workers, you talk about safety, if you got the wrong people and they're out there screwing up the water system. So we implemented that, and I think we still have turnover. But we've got, I think, a good base of, employees in the city.
Well, it's also morale and welfare. I think that has changed a lot.
Well,
Just in, I've been here. I mean, I think some of the stuff that you normally do, I mean, especially military wise, that's kind of my background and, but also on the management side is that to take the time and money to have to retrain somebody just sucks.
it
And I
does,
think-
but we used to have, and, you know, John mentioned this, but we combined some areas, like, we don't have a parks director because it's under Dave now, and in my opinion, our parks are as good a shape as they've ever been. So we combined some of those, but then we hired a human resource director for the city. Because frankly, our morale sucked in this city.
And she has brought it up. And
She has,
she's-
and I think that's part of reducing the turnover, but we took something that we felt we could combine and invested that in a resource. And then we got a reporter who I'd put up against any recorder in the city. But we had somebody that was bragging about doing 3 jobs and how we had to hire 2 people to do the job. Well, the job wasn't getting done. Now it is.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's how we kind of looked at things, that investment versus expense philosophy. But, you know, morale is, as Brenda said, having, and I, you know, attribute that to Dave and John also.
It doesn't always equal.
Everyone just came.
No,
There's been a lot of research that shows that if
Yeah.
you offered an IT professional, for example, 10-20% more, would you be happier?
No.
And it gets to a certain point, and no, it's not the money,
it's the
it's the
culture.
job, the department you're working in, the manager, you're.
Well, I believe that's why turnover in the city's down, just like.
Okay. Any other final words? I think we have what we're doing next week or next, not next week, good, 2 weeks. Thank you. And
So that's, 17th?
sounds right. No, what's the 4th?
Oh, today's, I lost.
Right?
it. 18th.
4th.
Okay.
18th, yes. Okay. I think that's it. Any staff comments?
Would it be useful at some point to have a discussion on transfers,
Ooh, I don't know.
do you think?
At a high level, maybe. I think, you know, because you start getting too far into the weeds and I think we're back to the same type of.
Yeah.
I know,
The intent would be to try to simplify it, make it a little more understandable.
yeah, and I think from a standpoint of how does, or what can we do and what can't we do? I think that might be valuable because I know that even in the mayoral, am I saying that right, debate was misunderstood. And I'm like, dude, shouldn't you know that? Anyway, it was very frustrating. So that would really be helpful, I think, as to what you can and can't do, which shouldn't take too long to discuss about, but we can even.
Funds transfer, not people transfer.
Correct. Yeah. Accounting stuff. Well, I guess you could transfer people.
It's an asset.
It's true. I was going somewhere. That's right. I think we're good. Any last committee comments, questions, concerns?
I know I didn't make it last week, but I don't know everybody. Can everybody?
Oh,
just
yeah,
say their
sorry.
name?
How about we start with,
Andy, I know you.
The-
Andy.
wait, what's the word? I didn't write it down.
Brusquely,
Brusquely. Brusquely said.
Quely.
Very good. You're going this way, Brenda.
Trent Gunderson.
Don Harrington, and I'm new.
I know John, and I know John.
Anastasia.
Anastasia. Peter,
Peter.
I'm Kurt Elam.
okay.
I'm Phil.
Neil.
Chambers.
Was Mike able to log in or no? Do you know?
Yeah, he was on here.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think he might, if I can find my mouse, still be on. Yeah, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Katie.
Okay, that's all I have. Anyone want to advance the adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Okay.